It is my privilege to introduce Josh McDowell. How does one introduce Josh McDowell? Josh began his journey to Christianity as a skeptic. He set out to disprove Christianity, and as a result, became not only a believer, but one of the finest contenders for Christianity. Josh, since then, he has delivered over 27,000 talks to over 25 million people in 126 countries. And I thought I'd traveled a lot of countries. He has written or co-authored 151 books, including More Than a Carpenter. He wrote Evidence That Demands a Verdict, which has been recognized by World Magazine as one of the 20th century's top 40 books. Josh's books have been translated into 128 languages. Josh and his wife Dottie have been married for 48 years and have 4 children and 10 grandchildren. And one of those 4 children happens to be some guy named Sean, who is a good friend of mine. So I have to introduce myself into this bio because I'm a vain and pompous guy. This is all about me, isn't it? No, just kidding, but I do have a point here. As many of you know, I was born at a very young age in Ghana, Africa. My dad was a scientist and an atheist and a communist. Fortunately, the Lord saved Dad in Sudan, where we went to after we'd gone to Jamaica and Ethiopia and a bunch of places. And he saved him, and as a result, I grew up with science. My dad was a professor in physics, and faith in close companionship. I saw no problems with either of them. But when I came here to the U.S. as a student, I was surprised to find how many Christians were afraid of science. So I set out to fix that. And somewhere along the line, so I was giving all these sermons, and so somewhere along the line, somebody said, you should read, have you ever read that book by this guy named Josh McDowell? He has a book called Evidence That Demands a Verdict. He writes about stuff that you're interested in. And I thought I was the only one. And so I got the book, and back then it was only this thin, now it's about this big, right, Josh? And I read it in like a month. And I wrote like 3 sermons on it. I was hooked. And then I went and got More Than a Carpenter, and I was hooked on that. And I realized that what I love so much about science and faith had a name. It is called apologetics. I had no idea that that even existed. And so I was so excited. And Josh is my hero because he introduced me to that, how to provide an argument for the faith that is within you. Now, I thought there was no way I'd ever meet this amazing guy, and then in the early 2000s, he actually came to town. He was speaking in Fremont, and I hung around, one of those fans, and I got to know him in that meeting, and I explained, and in that meeting, he explained to me why apologetics and theology, which I'd been focusing on, was critical, but if you don't have relationship, it all falls apart. And so I created the motto for my ministry, which is No Blind Faith: apologetics, theology, relationship, rational faith. Shortly after that, every time I saw him again, he'd yell out, "Neil!" and give me a big hug. We can't do that now because of COVID, but I want you to understand how much I love this man, how much I appreciate what he's meant to me, and I appreciate everything he's done. So ladies and gentlemen, a great and godly, wonderful man, my friend Josh McDowell. Oh, we got a video.
Meet Josh McDowell. Allow me to attempt telling you his life story and over 50 years of ministry in the next 90 seconds. Josh did not grow up with a strong Christian faith. In fact, as a university student, Josh set out to disprove Christianity altogether. However, when faced with the evidence, he was convinced that not only was Christianity true, but that it was based on a relationship worth devoting his life to. This led to the birth of the Josh McDowell Ministry. Since 1961, Josh has delivered more than 27,000 talks to over 25 million people in 125 countries. He is the author or co-author of 150 books, including More Than a Carpenter and Evidence That Demands a Verdict, recognized by World Magazine as one of the top 40 books of the 20th century. Over the years, Josh has consistently addressed hard topics such as the issue of truth, reliability of Scripture, moral integrity, and relationships. Today, Josh continues to write and speak to audiences across the globe. Despite his work, Josh will tell anyone that his greatest joys and pleasures come from his family. He and his wife Dottie have been married 45 years. They have 4 children and 10 grandchildren. Please welcome Josh McDowell.
I don't know about you folks. My tank is full. From what we have heard today and just about everything. I didn't know there was so much to talk about politics and voting as I've heard today. And I agree with Easy. We live in a great country. We do. I've been now it's 139 countries. And I don't care what one of our previous presidents says. The United States is an exceptional country. It really is. Now, don't get me wrong. We got our problems. But as we've seen over the years, America's a type that will solve its problems, and we are. One by one, we're solving them. We've learned so much tonight already. I feel like almost anything I say is going to be duplicating something that's already been said. There's two ways that I approach a talk. I say a lot about a little, have a few points and say a lot about each point. Or to say a little about a lot. And I've chosen to do that tonight. I'm going to share quite a few number of points on politics and voting. I'm going to be as neutral as I can, but I told my wife today, I have such deep convictions about everything I know in life that it'll come out where I stand, who I'd probably vote for and everything, and I don't apologize for that, but I'm going to try to be as honest and neutral as I can, because there's certain principles and everything that we must approach voting with. I just cannot believe how many parents do not train their children to vote. I just can't believe it. I spent hours with each one of my 3 daughters and my son on the responsibility to voting, principles of voting, how to approach voting, everything. And so actually what I'm going to do tonight is share some of the things that I shared over the years with my own kids. The Bible gives very little detail about voting, about politics. You have in 1st and 2nd Kings, you have a lot about politics, the rulers, the way they ruled everything. In Revelation, you have that when Christ comes back, he's going to be the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. But it doesn't mention a whole lot about politics. And so what I'm going to be sharing tonight are my convictions that have come out of researching voting over the years and my responsibility. I might say a few things that irritate some of you, and that's your problem, not mine, but I just like to point that out. Probably the biggest area would be in Matthew when it says, "Render unto Caesar those things that belong to Caesar, and render unto God those things that belong to God." One thing we are to render unto Caesar is to vote. We have that responsibility to God, and we have the responsibility to our country. There is not one single party that is perfect, and there never will be. There's not one single political party that you would say, quote, is biblical. In both the biblical parties, you could write down a number of biblical values and principles in each party. I think it's so important. It bugs me when people say to me, "Jeez, well, oh no, I never like to talk about religion or politics." I think that's about the dumbest thing you can say. I'm serious. What are two things that affect almost everything we do? Religion and politics. And people say, "I don't want to talk about them." I learned this. If you don't talk about it, you're probably ignorant. I'll tell you that. You're probably ignorant. And you're probably wrong on a lot of things. I have learned more things that I'm right on and wrong on through interaction with others, believers, non-believers, everywhere. Because until the truth that you believe you know is challenged to interact with, you can't really have the confidence about that truth. And this is why I think we all need positive political discussions, positive religious discussions, positive moral discussions. In raising my children, we would go to Laguna Beach, California quite a bit, and we always stayed at a hotel in the gay area, and we always ate breakfast at a gay restaurant. They were anywhere between transgender, lesbian, gay, everything. We always ate there. And one young man, the name of Jade, became like a son to me. I'd walk into the restaurant, I wouldn't even have to order. They knew what I wanted. The chef would come out, and they all knew what I believed. They knew what I stood for. And one day in there, and some parents just think, this is horrible. I wish every parent would do it. Walked in, we sat down. My two oldest, Kelly and Sean, were with me, and they were about 11 and 13. And I said, Jade, I went in the kitchen. I said, Jade, do you have a few moments you could spend with two of my kids? I said, yeah. I said, come on out. Pulled up a chair, sat down. I said, now, Jay, share with my children, what is it like growing up gay in America? Whoa. I got educated. I'll tell you this, you ever do that, God will give you a compassion for gays. A tremendous compassion. It's one of the smartest things I ever did with my kids. And we sat there for 45 minutes and listened, and then they asked questions. And then I would say, well, Jade, what are some of your fears? Oh, my heart was broken and all. But we need political interaction, folks. Please do it. Do it with your own family. Do it with non-believers. Do it with those that agree with you, with those that don't agree with you. And those people who get all heated and hotted up is because they're insecure. They're insecure. Always draw, I got a number of key principles, always draw upon biblical principles. I'll look at something politically that a candidate will stand for, and I say, now, is there a biblical principle behind that, either positive or negative? It's amazing, almost every time I would find something that helped me clarify that issue. So always think biblical principles, not so much biblical truths, biblical principles, how truth is worked out in life. Always think biblically. George Washington said, without religion and morality, it must work together or a nation can't exist. Many have said you can't have a democracy without morality. And I don't think you can have morality without truth. I really don't. And I don't think most of us believers realize how much God has given us in our hands and in the Scripture to live in any country, let alone the United States. And the more I know the Scripture, the more, every 4 years, big elections come along, everything, the more I'm committed to making a difference in my country. And I think that pleases the heart of God. Jesus died for the left, some people hate to think that, for the right, and everyone in between. In traveling to 139 countries, I've now spoken to over 45 million people. Woo! I've met people of every age, every walk of life, every persuasion, every religion, almost every religion in the world. And I can honestly say this, I've never met a person yet, now think of this, who Jesus doesn't love and didn't die for. Are you with me? I've never even those people, I just can't stand them. And there's a few like that. If I went fishing with them, I'd probably drown them or use them for bait. But I've never met a person that Jesus didn't die for, that he didn't love. Can I do any less than love that person? How in the world can anyone be a racist? I don't understand it. I just don't get it. Faith of a person. Ronald Reagan, almost 70% of all evangelicals voted for Ronald Reagan. He hardly ever went to church or anything. Jimmy Carter, who he's running against, was a born-again believer, taught Sunday school faithfully every week for years. And only 30% of evangelicals voted for him. I'm not saying that's wrong. Especially because I would have been wrong then, because I voted for Reagan too. It was kind of hard because Carter's a friend of mine. And he understood. To best understand, I think anyone's approach, or at least my approach to politics and voting, I am both a physical and social conservative. I think the division politically, I don't even like to use the word division. The challenges politically are not Christian, non-Christian, religious, non-religious. It's conservative, liberal. That's where the battle is. That's where the issues are. And in my life, that's where if you want to call it a division or what, where I stand opposed to a number of people. It's not really on religion or Christianity or anything. I'm a conservative for a number of reasons. And others have done as much study as I have and everything else. They're a liberal. They're a liberal. I can take conservative and find many biblical principles, and I can take liberals and find many biblical principles. But often the difference is, why are they applying those principles? That's the difference. My opinion is, if you don't vote, you don't talk about it then. I think if you don't vote, you've lost the right to talk about the problems in America. And I'll say that to anyone, eyeball to eyeball. A very great, a lot of you read it, thinking about him right now, a very famous Christian, a man I love and respect, learned so much from him. He did a major blog or iPod the other day, taking on Trump and Biden and everything, and he said that Trump's character and attitude would do more damage than all the abortion. And he said he wasn't going to vote. He lost me right there. And he went on to justify it. Well, I can't vote for either one. I said, oh my gosh, smarten up. Write in a person. Write in a person. I've never known anyone that's had to compromise their convictions by writing in a person. If you don't vote, and I won't listen to this man anymore in politics, no more. He closed the door to me. If you don't vote, you don't talk about it. In John 13, it talks about oneness in the church. Oneness should be in love and not in politics. Almost unity in love and division in politics. The word division is too strong. I can't, if any of you have another word, shout it out. See, what? Separation. I like that. Separation is better than division. It's kind of a fighting word. Separation. But it shouldn't be over the gospel, the scriptures, and it should all be in love. That's the oneness is in love, not in politics. Tony Evans, Pastor Evans, I think this is a classic statement. The ultimate solution won't land in Air Force One. You get that? The ultimate solution will not land in Air Force One. We are called upon to pray for both parties. I did not vote for Obama, but the moment Obama was elected, I said to my wife and my children, he's now my president. I'm going to pray for him. I'm going to hope to God he becomes the best president in the history of America. You know why I really wanted that so much? Because he was black. And I wanted the first black president to be the greatest president in the history of America. I was really let down, but anyway. Well, I mean, but like this election, no matter who wins, I'm going to start out supporting them. I'll pray for them. I'll encourage them. I'll do everything I can to help them, and I can do a lot of help because they become my president. I might disagree with them on a lot of political issues, but they're my president, and I'm a citizen of the United States of America. You know, we can't take voting for granted because we haven't had voting privileges for much over 200 years. Do you realize that? Probably around 200 years, I would say. Blacks and women have had a lot fewer years. We're really still new in it, folks. And so many of the countries I grew don't have the freedom to vote. Or if they do, it's totally meaningless. The saddest thing for me during the election year, and you have to consider this when you consider how you should vote, the media. I've always been one of the biggest supporters of the media until this election. And I'm so disappointed. I don't think I've ever been disappointed in any segment of our culture as I am right now of the media. And now we even throw in Fox News. For example, this is more subtle than outright blasphemy almost. Wallace had on his show a scientist, and he said to him, Chris said, "What do you think about when Trump said the virus would be over with soon?" And both of them just lit into Trump, made a joke of it, everything, and went on and on. And I remember sitting there saying, that's not what he said. And I went back and checked it. Took a while, because I don't have the access that the media has. And I went back and checked it. You know what he said? The virus would be over with soon, I sure hope. Do you see the blatant lie by Fox News? Took the I sure hope out of it and totally changed the entire story. That's evil. That really is. That's evil. And the problem is, it doesn't matter if it's in NBC, CBS, ABS, MSNBC, CNBC, Fox News, or what. They're pretty well in the same bucket. It's so discouraging. Now, those are some of the ideas to consider in voting. Here are some of the issues. I think with every candidate, these issues are critical. You say, well, you left out this. Well, it can only touch on so many. Yeah. You can only touch on so many. But for me, now, I'm giving this from a personal perspective. And I feel based upon the scriptures as I see them. One, character and integrity must be taken into consideration. It's not always my primary one, not at all, but it must be taken in. In Proverbs 29, it says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but the wicked rule, the people mourn. The king by judgment establishes the land, but he that receiveth gifts overthrows it. If a ruler listens to lies, all of his servants are wicked. That really gets to me with both candidates. Everybody's off on Trump line. Well, in the last debate, I think Biden beat him 3-1. No, I'm serious. I personally checked it out. The media wouldn't. And you know, to give both of them a little credit, I don't think they're outright, a couple times on both sides, yeah. But for the most part, it's not that they're outright consciously knowing I'm lying. They're just not doing their homework, and they get wrapped up in it, and then they start making falsehoods. Now, I'm not justified in any way. I believe in Scripture. We are to be devoted to common good of the community. Now think of that, for common good of the community. There's a place where, it says right here, in Jeremiah 19, and seek the well-being of the city where I have set you. Seek the well-being. And I put it that way, seek the common good. But I have to also admit, I've broken that many times. And I don't feel guilty at all. You say, how? Well, I ended up with 3 of my 4 children, sending them to private schools. Not the public school. I couldn't with a clear conscience. And so it was more for the common good of my family, not the common good of the community, that I chose to send my kids to a private school. But I have to ask myself, overall, am I committed to the common good of the community? And I believe if I am, then I'm also quite biblical. The sanctity of human life. Folks, the foundational, for me, for this other Christian leader that just did this blog and all, it's not. But he has his reasons. The foundation for me, folks, is abortion. It really is. It's life. Look, when the Psalm 139 says, for you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb. And we step in and destroy that knitting together, which is called life. I've yet to be able to vote for a candidate who promotes abortion. I'm especially scared this time around because one of the vice presidents is for fourth-term abortion right before the baby's born. And I just can't go for abortion. You can criticize me wherever you want, but I got to live with myself. When Obama my son has a black friend, and Sean asked him, because he was very, very pro-life, his black friend. He said, did you have any struggle when it came to voting with Obama? And Sean said, my friend's face changed. He said, oh, Sean, it was so hard. It was so tough. I can't tell you the restless nights I had, how I struggled with it. I wonder how many of us have ever struggled over an issue like that in voting. And he says, I've always dreamed, like I have, I've always dreamed of a black president and a female president. So I thought if Condoleezza Rice got elected, I'd feel 2 in 1. It'd be both an African American and a woman. But I want, in my lifetime, before I die, I dream of a black president and a female president. I really do. In fact, I think if I could really support the African American and the other, I would probably take a break from what I do and go out and campaign for them. Geez, I can't believe I'd ever say that. It's the first time I have. But anyway, and he said, I struggled so much Because here I'm so committed to life. But I've dreamed, I'm black, he was black, a black president of the United States. He said it wore me out. The thing I like about that story is how deep it went into his soul. Life and taking voting seriously. Then, freedom of religious speech. Freedom of speech, but it's narrowing down to freedom of religious speech. Now, where a lot of people are heading for, now see if you can catch this. A lot of people don't get what happened in Russia. Russians all the time would say, we have the freedom of speech. We have the freedom of religion all the time. We have freedom of religion. We have freedom of religion. We have freedom of religion. And they did. You say, no, yes, they did. They had freedom of religion. But catch this. And this is where the media misses it. And it was stated in their works now, the freedom of religion and the freedom of anti-religious propaganda. In other words, you could be a Christian, but if you dare to tell anyone, you're breaking a law. You only have the freedom to talk against religion. Do you get that, folks? That's dangerous. And there's a lot of people in America that are leading that way. In Acts 4, so they called them and charged them not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John answered them, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you rather than to God, you must judge. For we cannot but speak of what we have seen and heard. We've got to always have in the forefront of our mind with every candidate, where do they stand on the freedom of religious speech? And what I found, some in this election too, is that, boy, some people are deceptive. When you really dig in, it takes time to dig into what they're saying. I meant to bring a sheet that I had. Oh, I had this sheet. It's like this. The Epic Times newspaper, the Epic Times did a sheet on this election. I wish I had enough to hand out. The one I have is in my room. But it took economy, everything. There must have been 25 issues, and documented Trump, Biden, Trump, Biden. It was incredible. And it saved me hours of time because, one, with the Epic Times, I trusted them. And I'd recommend you go to the Epic Times website, EPOCH, theepictimes.com, and do, I don't know what you would call it, beliefs of the candidate, anything like that, and it would pop up. But it's really, boy, such small print. I had to put on powerful glasses, and then I could hardly read them because they wanted to get it all on one page. The freedom of speech. And then, this is probably number 2 for me. Number 1 is abortion. Number 2 would be racial equality. Racial equality. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth. Acts 17:26. And by your blood you ransomed people for God from your every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have made them a kingdom and priests to our God. Revelation 5. Racial equality. We have a lot of healing yet to be done in our country. But folks, this is where so many people, when they talk about the racial problem, they forget how far we have come. Folks, there's few nations in all of history on any issue has come as far as the United States has on racism. But don't rest on that. because we still got quite a ways to go. We still have quite a ways to go. And I remember when everybody was talking about police systemic racism, police after the riots and everything, police systemic, everybody started, even Republicans, everything was chanting that. Well, I took some time, did some research. Whoa, this is probably one of the biggest surprises I ever had in research. Do you know, for every black American killed by the police, there's 18 police killed by a black American. I thought, no way. He never even heard that, the media or anything. And I double-checked it and I said, I can't refute it. That's not systemic racism, except on maybe the part of the rioters. Folks, I think each one of us need to search our own hearts. And I hope every one of you will find some African Americans, Christian and non-Christian. Have lunch with them, have breakfast, have dinner. Talk to them, ask questions, listen to them, ask them for their story. Remember what just happened somewhere? Oh, Floyd's death. On Floyd's death, I knew I had to make a statement on it. So I went and called 12 black leaders, several non-believers and a number of believers that were leaders. And I simply asked them, how does this make you feel? I didn't ask them what they thought about it. When you want to get to the depth of person, especially your children, don't ask a cognitive question, ask a feeling question. Son, what are you thinking? No. Son, what are you feeling? Boom! You get to the core. Ask a feeling question. And so I said to him, how does this make you feel? And then I kept my big fat mouth shut. Ooh, that's hard for me. And some of you probably too. And I just listened. And sometimes every one of them would say something here, something there, and I totally disagreed with. I just forced myself, don't say a word. I just listened. Let me tell you, I got an education from my black brothers and sisters. I tell my black friends, I can't think the way you think. I don't feel the way, I don't have the history, the background that you have. But then I say to my black brothers, don't tell me you know how I feel or think. You can't because you've never walked in my shoes. We have to understand each other. And I can't tell you how many African Americans, every chance I get, I sit down and talk. On the plane, whatever. And I try to keep my mouth shut. But what is nice, so many will say, well, what do you think, Josh? Then I'm off and running. But if they don't say that, I keep my mouth shut. I'm there to learn. I'm there to be taught by another person. And you know what I learned? Floyd's death is not what triggered, not what caused the riots and everything. You say, what? No. This is what I learned from talking to these 12 African American leaders. It was a cumulative situation. Going back a number of years, a black person killed here, killed here, killed here, killed here. And it kept adding up. And then with Floyd, it was like a volcano opened up. And you know, I think that's true. It became cumulative. But at the same time, I think the police overaction and everything, overreaction and all, is cumulative. I really do. Now, you might disagree with me, but take it with you in the next few days. Think about it deeply. I think much of what's called police violence and everything is cumulative. It's not systemic racism. I watched all these times and watched the women, boy, especially about 40-year-old white women, progressives. They got to be some of the meanest people in America. No, what? In the next riots and everything, look at where the police are, standing right in front of the police. Over half of them are women about that age, yelling the dirtiest, filthiest, cruddy stuff, throwing things at them, taking things and pounding on their helmet and all. You can only take that so long. And just like my African-American brothers, where it became cumulative, where Floyd just went off the map. Well, it's the same thing with police. It builds up, and then finally it's got it. This is why I think these people, I just can't believe it. Boy, yesterday they had on news how many police departments have been defunded almost. It's staggering. And I can't believe it. That's so nonsensical. We ought to be pouring more money into it. Why? With what the police face, they have to be retrained, I would say, every 12 to 18 months. You've got to retrain police. No, and you couldn't. Don't you sit there and judge them. You couldn't take it, not one of you. And we need to retrain the police on sensitivity, everything. On the object of people and their hurts and all. We need to fund more the police and defund them, and no one's doing it. And so it's with my black brothers and sisters, it's accumulative, and they taught me that. I didn't come up with that. Every one of them used the word, Josh, you need to know this, it's accumulative. So it's not something I heard them and came up, this what it. No, they taught me what it is. But with the police, I say it's cumulative. And we need to constantly retrain police. Probably the person that has the greatest fear is not the mother or father watching their child walk out into the neighborhood. It's the wife, a spouse of a policeman, watching her husband walk out to his job that day. Statistics show more than be killed than anyone. And then I got to wrap this up. National security. National security. In Nehemiah, and they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. And we prayed to our God and set a guard as a protection against them day and night. This is why I always look at the military. Now, some people disagree with me, some believers, and that's okay. People disagree with me, it doesn't bother me. Well, yeah, sometimes it does. No, because of the consequences that I see of it. But I really believe in a strong military, and that's a key factor in me voting. A strong military. As again is said in John 19, and seek the welfare of the city where I sent you. And then taxation and government spending. Oh, boy, right now it doesn't matter what party. They're all irresponsible. Do you know where our debt is right now? To count to $1 trillion would take you 1,300 years. To sit right there right now and count to $1 trillion. 1,300, that's how big it is. Our national debt right now is $27 trillion. That's 126% of our gross domestic product. How do you ever live with that? Of every citizen, that's $82,261 owed. But citizens don't pay taxes. For taxpayers that are citizens, for every taxpayer, it's $217,934 you owe. Folks, I am convinced, next to pornography, which is number one, the national debt is the number two greatest threat to America. I really do. It's already starting to kill our chances of responding militarily or anything to any situation, helping other countries, everything. We have borrowed money for the king's tax on our fields and vineyards, and we're forcing our sons and daughters to be slaves. And some of our daughters have already been enslaved, but it is not in our power to help it, for other men have our fields and our vineyards. We are putting our children and grandchildren into bondage. If anything caused me to do a write-in vote, it would be this. And both of them on abortion. Care for the poor, the widows, and the orphans. That's got to be James 1. I look at everyone. What do they have built into the care for the poor, the orphans, the widows? Not always, but often the Democrats are a little more pro on that than Republicans. But you know, I've learned over the years, often there's no one way to approach a problem, solution. There can be two ways to approach a solution biblically. For example, with poverty. I'll take Trump as an example. In his campaigning, they bring up about poverty in the black situation. He says, the greatest thing I can do for African Americans is produce a great economy and provide jobs. They would do some handouts, but they said the handouts only go so far. You've got to create jobs. That's what broke my heart when COVID-19, but God knew it. It's in his hands. Stopped the greatest unemployment ever in history and the greatest job creation. But the way you help the poor is produce an economy with an inlet for jobs for the poor. I believe in that economically big, and that's how I vote. As Romans 13, I'll close with this. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Whew. I'm exhausted, not from speaking, just everything I've heard today. And when we took a break between EZ and this one, I had so much fun over there talking just to a small group of people. But I walked away and said, I'm all talked out. But I don't know if they enjoyed it, but I sure did. They sat there with about 6, 7 people in chairs, and I just sat there, and we started going at it. But folks, take to heart what I've shared. And I'll leave you with this. If you don't vote, then don't talk to me about it. Don't talk to me about the problems in the country. I won't listen to you. Well, I don't agree with either one. Then do a write-in. Your mother-in-law. Well, maybe it might have to be your mother, but write in. Thank you for giving me the first time ever in 57 years in ministry to ever talk on politics and voting. I never have. And now, I want to do it again, especially when I have more time to study and work on it and everything. Hey, I live down in South Orange County, Dana Point, and it's been so good being here this afternoon. If you get there, and maybe you lost your money, got robbed or something, and you don't have any place to stay, like Jesus, no place to lay your head, nothing to eat, no tickets to Disneyland. Look, I'm in the phone book, and I am. Look me up in the phone book and call me, and I'll pray for you.